Hey, welcome to my journey. Just got back from the Dollar Tree. Decided to buy 3 of these instead of 2 of these. Okay? And the goal is by the time these are finished, get like a couple of days, a few days, we will have acknowledged to her that she can go outside and shit. She can go outside and shit. Vicks has went up on their prices, and they're relentless. So I had to get me some nasal relief, and they work. They're not methylated, but they work. Then I had to go in and, just change my mindset. One of the things I had to change my mindset about was the fact that, I used to, buy a larger quantity in order to save money, right? But it seems like I need to shift from doing that now, and instead, if I can find a cheaper, smaller quantity, then that's the way I need to go. This whole week and 2 weeks, have been about shifting, right? And the shift was apparent to me because I had to here's an example. You have to shift. Like, before I used to buy the big container of Dawn, right? Dawn is like the best soap. And, they went from $8 to $10 right before my eyes. And I was like, wow, when is it going to stop, right? Then, I went in to the store here. I said, well, let's go back here and see what they have, right? And they had some Dawn there. It was in a little itty bitty container. Actually, even quite smaller than this one. Now, I used to use Ajax a long time ago, right? Because you used to be able to get the big bottle of Ajax for like $1. So now this 12 fluid ounces, it's $1.50. Okay. This, and even Palmolive, it's not a bad dish soap. If you're washing your dishes by hand. So yeah, it was a different mind frame, that came to me while I was in there, to help me understand, the reality of my position, because, my position hasn't gotten any better, right? And I kept thinking, well, it always is it's always the worst before it gets better, right? And then it got worse, right? I kept thinking it can't get no worse than this. Then it got worse. So, yeah. I mean, the type of meals that I've been having to eat lately, have been involving bread. Now, I'm glucose intolerant, all right? And it gives me IBS to eat bread. So, of course, I've been having, digestive issues, having to eat bread. And the bread that I was eating, involved things like sandwiches, right? Because I've been eating sandwiches. I know you've heard me talk about, eating those those bagels and sourdough. Okay? So, I've been watching some really, interesting videos about, how they thought, that the government is diversing, welfare recipients. It's like, no, the government is divorcing these men, right? They don't even understand that they're the ones that the government picked up the slack in helping them raise these children. Okay? And, if women, when women are like, oh, okay, well, they're going to hold accountability, and yeah, they were seduced or coerced or raped or whatever, wrong place at the wrong time, of course, and got pregnant, as long as the government provides a means, to keep the children, that's what's going to happen. They'll keep their children, right? But instead of letting these women raise these children, these men will leech off of these, welfare recipients, stay there, don't want to even pay their own way. Like, well, I just take a spot on the floor. And of course, once you let them in the door, it's a whole nother subject. Right? You're going to have to try to fight them to get their ass out, because they're not taking that spot on the floor. They're taking over your house. And they're doing it through a hostile takeover. They're not doing it legal where they're going to take, they're going to put their name on the lease and get qualified and all of that stuff. Nah, it's a hostile takeover. So, yeah, I've been warning people about this for damn near a decade now. Especially in states where, they have common law, where these guys could move in, call you their wife, and all of a sudden, they can leave with half of your shit. Yeah. And there's no time limit. There is no time limit. Like in California, you at least have to be there 6 months, to even claim any kind of rights. But there's no time limits here in Texas with the common law. And you can go through my videos, and I talked about this. Don't let these guys come and stay at your house Don't let them bring their shit into your place. Not even a little black bag. Because some men will try to claim that little black bag is an indicator that he had moved in because he had a bag. I'm like, how? You know, the bag probably couldn't even contain more than, you know, a weekend stay at best. Right? But if it's his word against your word, and he's coming across all cocky, you know. Now, granted, they shouldn't be able to do that at all if you are a welfare or, what do you call it, rent reduced person. Okay? They shouldn't be able to claim that at all because they're not on the lease. They didn't qualify for the reduced rent. They probably wouldn't get it. You know, like I said, this is what you would call, you know, a hostile takeover. Right? And so this is what our government is trying to stop because it's been going on too long. And the fact that it's been going on this long, you know, it's increased exponentially on how often it is happening. So, the only way it seems like they're able to make any kind of changes is through women. Okay? So, because the men, they refuse to change. They won't cooperate. You know, they'll just, you know, they'll die trying. Okay, they'll die trying. So, whereas the women is like, they'll get to a point where women, even when they even think that they could, you know, never give up, and you know, women will get to a point where they'll submit. They'll be like, nah, the juice ain't worth the squeeze. Okay? So anyway, you know, that's my rant about the differences between men and women. So I'm wondering if I can take my doggies for a small walk. Ooh, there's so much green moss on the water. It's a lot. God only knows how they have to clean that out. So yeah. But honestly, you know, considering everything, you know, it's been a very good day. Right? But, you know, the woman bashing, you know, and then, you know, when the women were bashed, you know, it became completely apparent that there's a hierarchy amongst the women. And the lighter you are, the more favored you are, because brown skin, well, all other skin colors, you know, are producing offspring that is favored by the super tribe. Okay? So, in a way, they get rewarded for that. Because, if the super tribe has, the genes and aesthetics that they're looking for, then, the super tribe is a happy camper. Right? But just because you breed with, part of the super tribe, doesn't mean that you can just eliminate the European DNA, right? So a lot of people, they're starting to wonder if it's really going to be beneficial for them to go ahead and take these DNA blood work so that they'll know, their true ancestry, right? You'll hear a lot of people talk about, how, they're Mexican, but Mexican is actually just a nation. You're not Mexican. You're just born in Mexico, which is just a country. Okay? So it was interesting how a lot of them, then they'll say, well, my origin is Latin. And it's like, Latin is just a region. It's not a race. Right? So then this guy started talking about, well, what's your phenotype, right? And that's how you look, when they first see you. The color of your skin, the features on your face, your hair type, and so then, a lot of them, had to come to a more realistic viewpoint of their phenotype. If like say, every country has phenotypes that distinguish their races. And it's in every country. Even though they're there might be a super tribe, dominating that country. Like in America, it typically is white, right? But it went from like 75%, 80% white after the genocide and the the Indians, being, escaping America, okay? Because not all of the Indians just stayed, The Indians were a migratory country. And a lot of them, they used to migrate all along the Americas. Typically, before the Spaniards, all of the Americas belonged to the Indians. We called them Indians, right? But when they got this global expansion, they act like, India is the only place that should be said to be Indians. And I'm like, why? Well, they want it to be disconnected. And to be totally honest, every time I come across an Indian, it reminds me of my tribal background. You know, and it was just disgusting me how now all of a sudden I cannot be called an Indian because of the global awareness of East India people. So now I'm called Native American, right? And even people refuse to call you Native American, they'll call you Indigenous Americans. And like I said, at least they're not calling me an Aboriginal like they did over there in Austria. Yeah, you're Aboriginal in Africa, yeah. So, anyway, I done got way off topic. I'm here at this park getting ready to take the doggies for a small little walk. They haven't been out except into the yard. So, we'll see how they act.